Katina and Kyle Connaughton are the founders, owners, and leaders of SingleThread, a farm, restaurant, and inn that's received practically every top accolade a hospitality business could receive. 3 Michelin stars, 3 Michelin keys, one of world's 50 best restaurants, number 2 in the world on the Least, 5 diamonds by AAA, 5 stars by Forbes Travel Guide, and the list goes on and on. Last week I drove up to Healdsburg, where they're based in Northern California, to record with them, and I'm excited to be sharing their story and insights in a 3-part series that starts with this episode, a reflection on the influences that formed them into the award-winning hospitality leaders they are today. Before we get into this, I have to say that spending some time with Katina and Kyle really inspired me, because not only are they obviously at the top of their game, but it was clear that they were in love, both with their work and with each other. And that's rare. It's such great energy to see. And before you think I'm getting too woo-woo or sappy, hear me out, because I truly believe if you fall deeply in love with what you're doing, and hopefully for all of us that's hospitality in one way or another, falling in love with and staying in love with the craft of what you do will help you excel in doing it. That's certainly the case for Katina and Kyle, so stay tuned to hear about some of their early influences and places that shaped them, because not only was it very formative to the work that they're both doing now, but I think regardless of where you're working or where you are in the world, you'll pick up on some things that will help you get the most out of your life and your career in hospitality.
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 Hospitality brings people together.
This is Hospitality Daily, the show that helps you stay informed and inspired each day by the most interesting people in hospitality. My name is Josiah McKenzie, and my goal is to help you reconnect with why you work in this industry and get fired up to go out there, delight others, and reach your goals. Let's get started. I'd love to hear from both of you, maybe starting with you, Katina. If you recall an early experience receiving hospitality that was maybe has manifested now later through SingleThread.
Well, I think the seed of hospitality for me was planted when I met Kyle when I was 15 and he was 16. And I went to go meet his family, and myself, I was raised by wolves. So I go to this very beautiful house and this civilized family, and I experienced such a warm welcome and a beautiful dinner and the warmest, most genuine sense of hospitality from this family that, of course, would become my in-laws, and I would love them forever. So I think that was my first foray. And then our time in Japan was undeniably so powerful in terms of hospitality, and just learning the strength of it in the most transparent and genuine forms of it.
Amazing. We're going to get to Japan. I feel like there's so much there we can cover. Kyle, if you rewind the clock, do you recall growing up in this environment, did it feel hospitable to you, or did it just feel like that's just kind of normal life? I'm curious if that was formative, your family was formative, or it was another experience that you had that shaped that?
Yeah, I think family was very formative. My family was not in the restaurant business or the hospitality business at all. Growing up, they did, with the business that they were doing, they were entertaining quite a bit. We had a lot of international, people visiting, and rather than just take them out to restaurants, they would bring people over for dinners. My dad loved to cook, and my parents really loved to entertain. They loved to throw parties with their friends with like themes. And so, I just saw a lot of that, and I always enjoyed that. And, sometimes they would like get me like suited up and give me a role and all of that. And I loved that. And, I also fell in love with food and cooking from an early age. We had a really great opportunity to travel quite a bit. And my parents were both from the UK. And my father's business involved a lot of travel, and we had family kind of spread out all over the world. And they really loved going to restaurants and really loved going to see like different food culture types of things. So I fell in love with like the food aspect and the travel, and like put it together kind of early on about food and culture and people and how it brings everyone together. And I think I just fell in love with all those things. And all those kinds of things were happening individually and together, and then it sort of like crystallized into this like restaurant life. And I went to go work at the sushi restaurant really early on when I was in high school, but I also went to work for this amazing family called the Bollinger family, who ran like a kind of a dinner theater place in our town. And I went and like worked every position there when I was young, from front of the house and the kitchen, really got some of my first kitchen roles. And they were like this whole family that ran this operation, and they treated us like, if you worked hard and you did a good job, they treated you like family. And they had these relationships with people and their guests who had been coming for years and years and years. And I just loved the way that they brought people in and made it like their home. They made me feel like part of the family there. And I just worked so hard for them because I just cared so much, and I just like felt a part of it. And they like very early on kind of like set this like sense of what hospitality was all about, and this idea of family and what hospitality could be.
Hearing you describe that is heartwarming, but also, yeah, I think hearing you both talk about travel and kind of this international sort of lifestyle, it feels very highbrow. And I feel like there's also a part of your life back then that was in the punk rock scene, the skate scene, the snowboarding scene. Have any of those elements stayed with you now as you're providing hospitality at the highest level? What's the punk side?
All of those have stayed with us.
Well, I mean,
that's a big part of it too.
The punk rock scene, the skateboard scene, snowboard scene, and that was community when we were young. That's what we knew of community, and that's still considered our community. But I think that definitely has stayed with us and carried us through a lot of twists and turns and times of perseverance. And we were just talking this morning about how we've lived a life against the grain, truly, and have defied a lot of people who told us that we weren't going to be able to accomplish what we dreamed of. And that just, we always had that fire to continue to do so. And by doing so, we really surrounded ourselves with like-minded individuals who also just had that tenacity to really follow their path, whatever that may mean to them.
Yeah, I think the spirit of all of those things too. I mean, we grew up in Los Angeles, Southern California, in the 80s and 90s, and it was really like this, the skate scene, this really amazing punk rock music scene. It was like the start of the trajectory of snowboarding, which is like a really big passion of ours, and we still travel all around the world to do that. And the thing that was really important about all those things in our lives was like they were like these individual pursuits, but that you did as part of a community, and I never played team sports and was never a part of that, never like went, it wasn't like a thing we did in my family. Again, my parents are from Europe. And so they didn't have that aspect of like American culture as part of their life. And it just wasn't an interest of mine of being a part of that. And I wanted to do these more individual, pursuits as did, Katina. But it was like you're doing them as an individual form of expression, and there is like a essence of rebellion with them too, but also there is this really amazing sense of community that's part of it too. And that, a kitchen is a lot like a skate park or being out snowboarding with your friends, where everyone is pushing each other to like, you have to like perform, you have to like learn new things, you have to like kind of, get practice, and then eventually you'll land it. You kind of have to take some hits, and, you have to fall down and hurt yourself in order to, to move forward. And the sort of the way that the culture is inside of great kitchens is the same culture you'll find at a great skate park or amongst a group of friends out in the backcountry or, at a snowboard park or something like that. It's all like the same like with that kind of punk rock scene, which was really always about, not just about like rebellion for the sake of rebellion, but it was about questioning things, questioning authority, questioning what, you couldn't do, these ideas of like that specific things in your life or your background and education dictated where you were going to go in your life. And we just didn't buy into that. And, as Katina had said, we kind of told no, or that's not going to work. And, when we was telling people that want to go and work in Japan and learn how to cook Japanese food, I mean, a lot of people in that time, both on the American side and the Japan side, were like, that's not possible for you. That is not an option. And we were like, that can't be. We have to figure out how to do this, because this is like, a pursuit. So it was the background in those things which gave us all throughout these years and continues still to this day. And everything, that we're doing is to say like, we our trust and our belief is in ourselves and the team that we build around each other. We don't really like listen to that outside. Here's what you can and can't do. Here's what you should and shouldn't be. Or even here's what fine dining is, or here's what hospitality is supposed to be. It's like we just have continued to kind of create our own path.
I love that. Now, Kyle, your dad was doing business in Japan. It sounded like you had a fascination with Japan, Japanese culture, Japanese food since a very young age. You both meet, you fall in love, and it seems like you've been on this journey together. Was the decision to move to Japan difficult? Because I know you had this fascination with it, but I'm curious. It's also a big life change to move to Japan, or were you both excited about it?
We'll be back after a quick break.
Are you enjoying this conversation? If so, I invite you to text this episode to a friend or colleague as well. Not only will you let them know that you're thinking about them, but you'll help them as well. One more thing. I'm having a lot of fun right now sharing videos and photos from the stories on the show, so if you'd like to see those or watch along, open up Instagram and YouTube now and follow Hospitality Daily so we can stay in touch. All right, let's get back to the conversation.
We were excited. We were also so young and naive, and I think ignorance was a bit blissful. But we knew that we just had to follow this path and see what transpired. So I don't think taking risks was uncomfortable for us. I think just being idle would have felt uncomfortable, and having wished we would have done something rather than just putting ourselves out there, even if that meant falling flat on our face, would have been well worth it. So I think it was comfortable for us.
It was just like, I felt for me, it was just like a necessity. Like this just like has to happen, and just thought so long about it, dreamed about it, and it, told how all the reasons it couldn't happen. And it was like, okay, well, what are the things that we have to do to make it happen? So going to Japanese culinary school and going to a language tutor and, overcoming those sort of like obvious barriers to entry that were there to get over those hurdles. Rightfully so, right? And to be able to go and really take in another culture. And, sometimes foreigners, Americans go and work in Japan and all kinds of different industries, including our own. But it's sort of like in the capacity of being a foreigner and in keeping in, English language and those kinds of things. And that's not what we wanted to do. I wanted to go there and like be in it, like immersed in it, and learn it from the inside, out, and have those types of experiences. And it was tough to do it that way.
What did you find useful in immersing into the culture? You mentioned language classes. The reason I ask is there's a lot of our listeners that I think either work internationally from where their home country is, or they aspire to. Hospitality is such a global business. And I talk to so many people that find this challenging, even for places they've always wanted to live and work. They find it challenging to immerse. And it seems you both did that well in Japan. It probably took some effort and some time, but it feels your time in Japan, for both of your areas of respective work, you really went deep to understand the culture, how they do things there. So I'm curious, on the tactical level, what did that look like? It sounded like language classes was one element of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, also the full immersion was like there was no half step to take for what we did, because it wasn't like we kind of moved to Tokyo and kind of found an expat community and we had other, foreign people within the workplace and within our, our community and our support network. But when we moved to a tiny fishing village in the North Island of Hokkaido, with a few hundred people who lived there, and most of whom were scallop fishers or farmers. And so, our kids went to the public school there. There wasn't any of those kinds of things. So it wasn't really like a choice of how deep you want to immerse yourself. It was like
full immersion,
right, full immersion, like in the deep end, of things, which was really, really hard. We recall a lot of like the good times and the great lessons and the amazing relationships and things that were born out of there. But, in reality, actually was very, very difficult on every level, on a work level, on a social level, on a language level, for all of us, including our kids. But everyone went and had an amazing time and thrived. Our kids kind of really, really slipped into it for as much. Like they had never had foreign students at the school before, and then these two kids, show up, and they just did amazingly well. Katina found herself in this community of amazing people within the town, and I was just like going through the grinder at in work, and it was so difficult and challenging, and the work culture there and at the time, the hours and right, it's so demanding. But we were also together as a family, and we were living it together, and we had this quality over quantity of time together, and we were in this beautiful, very, very special place, and we were all four of us were in this like incredible like life lesson learning type of environment for a few years.
Open heart, open mind situation, and it was extremely humbling. And I think what I have taken away from it is a lot of compassion, and our daughters and Kyle as well, a lot of compassion for people in this country and elsewhere in the world where their primary language becomes secondary. And so it was extremely humbling, but we did have each other, and I wouldn't change anything. I'm so grateful we went through all of that.
It seems, Katina, you really immersed yourself in the farming community there. And what was that experience like? How did you, on a practical level, get integrated into that community?
Well, the farming community was all around us, whether I wanted to be a part of it or not. And it was a really profound moment for me because I started to understand seasonality coming from Los Angeles. I didn't really have any connection to my food system. I wasn't paying attention to subtle nuances in nature. And all of a sudden, I am surrounded in this beautiful place by a beautiful landscape and a community that has the utmost reverence for seasonality. So I learned so much. It just became a very natural part of our life there. And so that was a seed that was planted long ago and just kept continuing to thrive throughout the years.
I love that. Now, I feel like some of the most compelling areas of innovation happen when cultures or different practices collide. And I feel like this, if I had to describe what you're doing at SingleThread, it seems all of your life experiences are coming together. And I guess just on that notion, I want to talk more about what you're doing here and about Healdsburg. But my understanding is the name SingleThread really speaks to the through line from the farm to the restaurant to the inn. I'd actually like to get both of your thoughts on this, maybe starting with you, Kyle, in the sense of, I don't know, I'm trying to think how to make this a pointed question, but I'm thinking a lot about how, on a kind of personal level, how meaningful it is to take these different life experiences you have and create out of them. I feel like what you're doing in the restaurant, Katina, you're doing on the farm, and together you're doing at the inn. That is, that's interesting. So I'm trying to think how to make it a more specific question, but does that resonate at all, I guess, the through line?
Yeah, I mean, the through line is very, very important. And, as we say, the why behind anything big or small that we do is like really central and core to everything. And it's core to our culture here, down to anytime you give someone instruction, you're teaching someone, you're training someone on how to do anything. It doesn't matter what, how big, ever big or small it is as you're telling someone what to do, how to do it, you have to say, and this is why we do it this way. Like, and this is, why you cut it this thick versus this thin, or, you do this practice versus this practice. Whatever. It just kind of gets built into your culture to always know and be able, and articulating the reason why behind anything, big or small. In terms of kind of like really the culmination, for us, we opened SingleThread when we were 40, and we had a lot of life experience and career experiences and different, things that we did that were really important to the two of us to live in Japan and in the UK, and the traveling and the experiencing and all the farming and setting things up the way that we wanted them and needed them to be from the beginning, and not say, all right, let's just get something going and then we'll add on this and then we'll figure out that component later. It was really like we needed to have this through line from the very beginning because it was central and core to what that experience was going to be for the guests, and it connected all of the why together. It wasn't missing pieces. Obviously, in the 7 years, you grow and you learn and you progress, and people come and they work for you, and they, and they're working with you, and they they're developing and bringing great ideas to the table. So there's a lot of innovation. But being said, like the central and core things have been there from the beginning, and we needed that time. I think oftentimes what happens, especially among chefs, is like, you get out there and you're cooking, and you're learning, you're moving around, and you get that sous chef job, then you get that head chef job, and then you're kind of at a young age, you're like, all right, and now I want to do my own thing, which is fine, and I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong, but at a very, very young part in your life, when you still are learning and growing and need a lot of experiences to really, really, truly define who you are, what you want to say, and really get a very holistic look about what you want to do, you kind of feel that you need to take that plunge early on. And then you've kind of set that stage for a very long career ahead of you, that you have put yourself into that position. And, oftentimes question with the young chefs to say, like, you don't have to open a restaurant by you're 28. Like, it's okay. Like you can do these, have all these different experiences. So of course there's no one right way or wrong way. That was just the way that we did it. But it allowed us to realize a vision that we had that was built, over a few decades, together with Katina and I, and then later with Tony, our partner, who came on to fully realize it, which is ultimately why we named it SingleThread.
I love that, and it's inspiring to me because my understanding is there's a Japanese concept about finding something in the intersection of your purpose and what brings you life. And it seems like both of you have done that. It seems like with your work at the farm, you're sort of in that bullseye. But how do you think about that intersection of all these different factors that matter to you and what it feels like to operate out of that?
Yeah, I definitely am shaped by the sum of my life experiences, so much so that, as I mentioned earlier, there was a seed that had been planted and continued to thrive. But I think most of the seeds throughout these years that have been instilled in me were just lying dormant for a very long time. And much like in nature, when there is a wildfire or a frost, those seeds need that disruption in life to actually be able to flourish. And throughout the years for me, through, a multitude of tiny disruptions, maybe some a little bit bigger than others, everything started to make sense. And so my path wasn't necessarily as straightforward as Kyle's, and I have found myself at many an intersection. But what became very clear to me was that I was really destined to devote my energy to the land and to be a part of nature and to be a part of creating a food system that we felt so strongly about, to be able to bring community into it and work with our aspiring chefs to connect them with where their food is coming from, to have a little piece of stewardship of a sliver of land for as long as I'm able to. And that's just a life well lived for me. But it definitely took a lot of intersections and a lot of life disruptions for those seeds to be able to grow.
And that's a wrap for episode 1, but make sure you're subscribed to the Hospitality Daily podcast in your podcast player, because tomorrow Katina and Kyle join us again for episode 2 of this special mini-series to talk about pulling all of these life experiences into SingleThread, the award-winning farm, restaurant, and inn. What I love doing on this show is looking for high performers, learning what they're doing, and then learning why they're doing what they're doing. But then also looking to see if there's other high performers doing the same thing. Is there some bigger trend happening that we need to be aware of to function at the highest levels? That's why I was excited to have Dax Cross, the CEO of Revenue Analytics, on the show recently to talk about what he is seeing working with some of the biggest groups in the world like IHG. A trend that he's seeing and I've seen in conversations for this show is a centralization of functions like revenue management. And of course, revenue management is so important because if your hospitality business doesn't make as much money as it should be, it's really hard to invest in hiring the right people, paying them well, and creating extraordinary experiences for your guests. You need to make money, and you need to do that through smart revenue management. That's why I recommend you listen to my conversation with Dax, where we talk all about this. There's a link in the show notes to that. And also check out what they're doing at revenueanalytics.com to understand how you can uplevel your revenue management function. Before we go, I want to let you know about a few more things. First, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite app to stay inspired each day by actionable insights from the most interesting people in hospitality. Second, I've started sharing videos and photos from the stories on this show on Instagram and YouTube, so if you'd like to see those or watch along, I encourage you to follow Hospitality Daily there so we can stay in touch. Third, if you'd like to listen to more conversations like the one you just heard, visit this podcast website at podcast.hospitalitydaily.com. I've spent a lot of time building out this website because I want to make it really easy for you to listen to the topics and guests that you are interested in, whether that's culture and leadership or operations or technology or something else. Browse and search the entire library for some of the top leaders and innovators in hospitality at podcast.hospitalitydaily.com to get ideas for delighting the people around you and reaching your business and career goals. I produce this podcast each day and give it away for free because I want us all to learn and grow together. If you enjoyed today's episode, I just have one favor to ask. Please take a moment to text or email this episode to a friend or colleague who might appreciate it as well. They'll be grateful to hear from you, and what we covered in the show can help them, as I hope it helped you today. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you here tomorrow.